Hey, Ramblers, before we kick off today's episode, thank you for even taking the time to listen to the podcast. We appreciate it. If you love the podcast, toss your 2 cents in using the hashtag Let's Ramble and make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest content and updates. Visit us at our new website at offsource.tech and make sure to follow us across all social platforms at Assistance HQ. Now let's ramble. And now, a moment from our sponsor. Hey guys, welcome back to another wonderful episode of The Ramblings. I'm your host, Angelo Roberts, with your co-host, Ben Chester. Things are looking super spicy as we move into the second half of the year, and we're starting to now prepare and look in the future because I consider us visionary leads, visionary founders. I feel like that's a good word to use. We're founders with vision. Not every founder has vision. They just have operational skills, which is completely different. And one of the things that we've been going over recently is the benefits of being wealthy. And one of the biggest benefits of being wealthy has to do with being able to take full advantage of the tax code. So with you being a graduate of Michigan Business School, what with your experience and what you've been learning recently, what are your thoughts on the advantages the wealthy have, especially when it comes to taxes?
Oh, well, number one, it's great to be back. We have a lot of fun doing this, and we have a lot of fun just like coming from just really two different perspectives on almost all of these things. And I would say like my perspective on this is just like looking at just the effective like tax rates of how much we're actually getting from these major businesses, and like looking at, just like the fact that they can straight up just like buy the people that write the tax code. So like obviously like like if you were able to write your own tax code, it would be favorable to you. So I don't know. I think I'm actually obviously a little more interested to see like where you're at on it, because to me it seems like fairly cut and dry that like, oh, they're not paying taxes. You can see that by the fact that we don't have any social services, and by the fact that they're making record profits. Like, well, where are you at?
I feel like if you're referring to social services, that's how we spend our taxes. Because if you look at, it's not that fact that they're not paying taxes. I mean, some companies obviously are not paying taxes if we're looking at like Amazon or Starbucks and everything of those natures. But when you're focused on the overall whole and saying that they're not collecting taxes, bro, we collect billions of dollars in taxes. Like, so it's not that it's not the issue of not taxing the rich. Because just if by saying no social, if we don't have social services and equating that with, it not taxing the rich. So what about the defense budget? We have the largest defense budget than the next 20 something countries combined.
I think it's 7 or 8, but that's still a very, very striking number. And you have a point.
So I don't think that it needs to be a tax the rich kind of situation. I feel like it just needs to be the government needs to do better at, like I said, it's not what you make, it's what you do with what you make. And that even applies to our country status and everything. It's not how much taxes we make, it's what we do with the taxes that we make. Because we clearly make enough taxes. If we can build super rockets that aren't going, think about that. We spend a lot of money on the defense budget, and we aren't on the defense. We are on the offense. And we might as well call it the offense budget because we're not defending anything.
True.
So, when we talk about defunding the police, I think the military needs to be defunded as well.
100%. 100%. I guess maybe I'm just kind of resigned to the fact that the military just in America is just gonna be a major aspect of what we spend our money on. But at the same time,
and you're
I do
reckon.
Oh no, I hate it. It's the worst thing ever. We're literally murdering people for money. But I don't know, man. I don't know what we're gonna do besides just hey, can you guys stop murdering people for money? And they're gonna be like, no. And then so I don't know where we go from there.
We go by stop asking and demanding rich people to pay more taxes and start asking and demanding rich people to do social justice works. Because the amount of money, to complain about what they do in terms of taxes. How about this? You tell them, or create like, because that's where tax incentives were created for social services. Basically, the government said, or what in my thought process, the government said this: listen, we're obviously not going to provide you guys with the proper social services. So what we will do is give you a tax benefit if you provide the social services. Which is why, like, why do you think donating and having charitable contributions is a tax write-off? Because they want the people that are rich to be the people that help infrastructure the rest of the economy.
Mm-hmm. I suppose then we'd have to get into just like the efficiencies. And like, for example, like, let's talk about just like education is a great example. Like, I'm not necessarily even totally against the concept of charter schools just because like our public school funding system is so bad that in some places the schools just like aren't going to be good structurally.
What are
So you wouldn't want to like
I know what a charter school, I've seen them charter schools, but like I don't know what the definition of what a charter school is.
It's just a school. I don't know if it necessitates that it's run for profit, but it's ostensibly like a for-profit school that replaces public schools. And so like when you look into just like the quality of the majority of these schools, not to mention how much they cost, like everything else, it's way less efficient to have like a private business run something and take a profit margin off of it. And a lot of the times, like that incentive, like not only makes it cost more, but decreases the value of the service because they're not focused on the service. They're focused on cutting costs and making money.
But in a school environment, if you're a charter school, wouldn't they have like a similar, we're not going to call it a business model, but if it's school, I feel like all school in general is a business model, period, whether it be a public school or private school. But if it's a for-profit education system, wouldn't that mean that your focus is on the children? Because that's like, how do you determine how do you profit from a school in the sense of you have to have results? You feel me? So like if people are paying money, there would have to be results coming from, like, depending on who pays the money, I would assume, so why would that not be why would a for-profit situation not be as good as a non-profit situation?
Because of the incentives. And the incentives in I think like a great analogy with which to understand why like adding profit makes things worse instead of better is like prisons. I mean, like in terms of like a public prison, the goal is just to like hold people and like blah blah blah. Like it doesn't necessarily matter whether there's more or less people in there because like nobody's trying to like do any kind of efficiencies or economy to scale. Versus a private prison that makes say $50,000 to $100,000 a year for every person that they have in their book on their books for like an entire year. Like they are heavily incentivized to like traumatize and harm and like do anything they can to try to like increase like recidivism rates amongst the people that are in their care and in their facilities. And like not only that, but they're also incentivized to lobby for specific laws that get more people sent to prison. So it's not even necessarily just a matter of like efficiencies and things like that, but it's just like introducing profit into an industry or into like a sector in which like profit shouldn't be the goal always makes things worse.
But if we use that same logic for school, wouldn't that incentivize schools to produce results? So if in that prison example, in the for-profit prison, they are using it as a means to keep the people in prison. So if you are a school and you're profiting off a school, would not you be focusing on the results of the school? Like if the results of a prison are for you to be in prison, would not the results of the school be education? And so by making that a for-profit thing, the people would, even if it's on a false level, care about the results of the student because of the money. Wouldn't that like what do you like? That's my thought process on that. Like if we profit off of school in the sense of no, I see what you're saying now, because we just wouldn't. Okay, it clicks now. Okay, because I thought
right.
of college.
And think about what a
college.
charter school does. Like think about how, like you have to think about how they make money. They don't get a check for based on like their kids' test scores. They don't make money based on like how effectively they educate kids. It's like anything else. It's a volume play. They make more money the more kids that they have enrolled at the school. So that incentivizes larger classroom sizes. It incentivizes like squeezing kids into like squeezing more kids into a building that should really be in there. And so like that's what I mean, where like it's about like the for-profit aspect of business incentivizes certain things. And for like industries, it just doesn't even make sense to deal with those negative consequences. Like let's just like cut business out of this and let's just provide the service.
Right, but okay, so if we like that's the hardest thing because when you provide a service, everyone in that in even in a nonprofit situation, everyone still expects to get paid. No one does any like like you still have to pay for the teacher, you still have to pay for the principal. The building ended up like the entity, like the school entity itself may not make profit, but I mean, it's certainly got to spend money.
Right, but when you don't need to make profit, you have more money left to like spend on the other things because there's no profit.
But what other things are you going to spend on?
Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just like pointing out the difference in just like automatic operating efficiency. Like, if you have no reason to need to like reserve any money or like as profits, then you're just going to be able to spend more money at every level of the process than if you're trying to cut corners to make profit.
Okay. And so how do you feel like that affects the middle class, the poor class versus the rich class in the sense of that? Because if we're referring to the education and how it goes in, because private, white people and rich people send their kids to private school, and I would think that that's like the epitome, if you will, of a for-profit situation in school. However, we glorify those. I am definitely planning on sending my kids to a private school.
Right. Well, the thing about private schools is that like private schools and the people who want to spend their money to send their kids to private schools like also don't want to pay their taxes so that other people's kids go to schools that are just as good as theirs. And it's like just something that's just a remnant of like Jim Crow and segregation and redlining to where like they were just able to create a situation in which they're like, oh, well, only white people can live here and our houses are worth way more than yours. So therefore, like our property tax values are going to be a lot higher. We're going to have way more funding for our schools. So our schools are going to be good and your kids can't come. Versus like doing the same kind of scheme, except if you base that on a neighborhood with like real estate values that are depressed and most people are renters instead of homeowners, and you base like the funding for their school off of that and not how many kids are there, then you have structurally underfunded and bad schools. So it's just like you can't separate the like high quality, expensive education some kids are getting from the fact that other kids are getting the exact opposite experience. Like the fact that their parents don't want to pay for other kids to get the same experience is why these kids go to bad schools.
Okay, hold on. When you say that parents don't want to pay for other kids to go to schools like theirs, expand on that because I mean, if I have a kid going to a particular school and it costs money, I don't want just any person coming to this school. I want there to be like a strict guideline on what is allowed or what's not allowed because I'm paying quality money for my child to go here.
No, I'm just talking about as it relates to like the reason why like schools where like minorities go mostly are underfunded in bad schools is because like generally speaking like white people don't want to pay for like kids of color to get educated at the same level that their kids are going to get educated.
Yeah, but how does that directly relate to them not wanting people of color? Like we already established before that we want to avoid a certain amount of tax things just because it's who wants to pay taxes. You feel me? It like even like if you were to go into the hood, which is this is the closest thing I can think of to how black people get over on their taxes is the extra kid situation. I'm sure you've heard of the claim a child, or always know that one person that's like, yeah, I can claim a kid, and you're like, you don't have any kids. Well, I know this guy. And so, you know the tax guy that can get you a kid. so
Facts.
so in that kind of situation, that is a similar way of saying, well, basically, we screw the government. And when you say screw the government, it unfortunately means that you have people that are going to rely on the government and no longer will have good services because everyone says screw the government. It's not just white people or people in these rich areas. It's even people like us, screw the government. But when you say screw the government, that in turn screws people that rely on the government.
Right. I think the thing that distincts it is that there is historical precedent and like specifically like if you go to a PTA in a white neighborhood right now, parent teacher like whatever thing, and you say, "Hey, I think that we need to allow like more kids from the wrong side of the tracks into this school," you will hear exactly what I'm talking about. Like
Okay,
go suggest to some white people in a nice school district that they need to let a bunch of black kids from the other side of town into their school and see how those white parents feel about that. If you're unsure about whether or not they want their kids to get good education at the expense of other kids.
but if they can afford it, why don't we just bring them in? Why say, hey, we want more? Like, you can't. When it comes to the private education system, it's not about your kids being on the wrong side of the tracks. It's about you being able to afford to get in. And they can't say anything if there was an influx of a middle class or upper middle class black people that moved into the next door, like just on the outskirts of the red line. You can't stop them from putting their kids into that school. I think we need to focus on getting wealth into black people's hand because it now forces people to deal with the idea of segregation or you not wanting your kids to have it, because now it can't be a money situation. Because I feel that I'm a dot my T's, cross my I's. I said that completely wrong, but because if we say they don't want black people to have the same education, we can't definitively say that because the basis is on money. And it just so happens that these private schools that cost money, we don't happen to have access to that kind of money, especially
those private schools were created when public schools were integrated, like, and specifically structurally created with the intention that we would not be able to afford them so that they could stay as white only schools.
Expand on that. I do not know about that.
So essentially, like in integration in the 1960s, like in Brown versus Board of Education, when they said like separated and unequal is like not lawful and that like they needed to integrate schools, like a lot of places were like, no. Like, and like specifically like in like some places, like for example, I like heard about like this anecdote from a school district in Kansas during this long YouTube talk I listened to, which is actually really amazing, called White Rage. It's something that's like will like definitely like open up a lot of perspective. And it's something that's for sure that's what'll be my education thing. But so yeah, this is like that school district in Kansas literally just canceled their public schools. No public schools anymore if they have to be integrated. So what they did is they just like created this just like charter private school that was whites only, and then created like a voucher system to where like the white kids were able to receive a voucher to where like if they couldn't afford to go to the private school, like they could still go. And like just only the black kids wouldn't be able to have any schools. So like when we talk about the differences in education and the differences in like resources, like these are battles that have not only taken place in like federal and state legislation, but also in every single like parent teacher association like meeting in which like these like I mean, like it just happens demographically to be upper middle class white people. And we're not even talking about private schools. We're talking about they try to keep kids out of like the nice public schools.
Which I can agree on that, because if you've ever been to a certain white area. Like out here, it's called like there's areas like Greenwich. But if you go to the high school, it is like this is a public high. Like the public high schools in certain areas are like, yo, what kind of high school is this? Like you have 3 soccer fields and 2 baseball fields and a practice football field and a game football field. What?
Like that's what I mean, because like it's something this is something that's true and not true at the same time. Like, is there more than enough money out here for everyone? Yes, there 100% is. Like, so to the extent when people say like, well, I mean, it's out there, go get it. Like, yes, it is out there to an extent. But at the same time, like people have that shit right now. And like you have to deal with the world as it is constructed, in which you have nothing and like other people have everything already.
Mm. And so what in terms of the divide and the wealth gap and what we were, going back to our original point of benefits of being wealthy, what would you say is as a byproduct of being wealthy when it comes to the benefits of being wealthy first generation versus being wealthy, for a while? Because as we see a lot of emerging wealthy Black families and everything, and we talk about the wealth gap and how even though we're rich in these particular areas, it's not as much. What benefits do you see from being a newer money situation?
I feel like new money typically just doesn't get you in the club right away. Because it's still like it's about more than just being rich. It's about having been raised rich, having gone to certain schools, like, and it's like one of those things where it kind of also relates to, I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it's like, what do you call a thief? A thief. What do you call a thief's grandkids? Somebody that comes from a good family. So like it's really just about like how long your family has had money, how you were raised, who you were around. That really like determines like that acceptance into society, I think, even more than money. And that's why Black people, like, even though we're getting money, like we're only getting into the club to a certain extent, like no matter what you do and how much you have.
Would you consider that a benefit of like how does that benefit other people or other generations, or affect, or not even benefit, even how does that affect other generations?
Well, I would just say in the sense that like, I don't know, there's just a whole lot of people that list out their accomplishments, but don't list out the part where their uncle gave them their first job, and they don't list the part where their parents like talked to the dean and got them a remake on an exam, and they don't talk about the part where like their parents were able to like set them up with like an apartment in DC so that they could do an unpaid internship for a senator who then recommended them for like whatever something else like after that happened. Like there's just all of these like small things that like you just get and other people don't get. And I mean, it's just like everything else. I mean, like if you're 6'8" and you're running and jumping, can dunk a basketball harder than anybody else, like people are going to give you things that they're not going to give other people. So it's not like even an indictment or saying that like these people are terrible or horrible. I just think everyone needs to be a lot more conscious of like what they're getting, and they need to be like real with themselves about like how easy and how much easier it really is, like when you have resources and when you already have things going for
Wow, true words. Well, it's wrapping up to be 9:30, and that's really the time that we have for today. Thank you for coming on another episode. We love having these kind of conversations. So, anything you want to depart with when it comes to the benefits of being wealthy when we're talking about the overall aspects within America only, or even within the Black community? What would you give to someone who is aspiring to make a certain amount of money?
Right. I think for me, it's what we talk about in terms of like what you tell your kids. Like if you're wealthy and your kids have all kinds of like advanced like opportunities and they're getting all these things that other kids aren't getting, don't tell them it's because they're special and they're working harder than everyone and that like they're just great and they deserve it. Like, no, they're related to somebody who is giving them a bunch more opportunities and a bunch of stuff that other people aren't getting. Everybody goes to school every day. Everybody doesn't get like brand new car on their 16th birthday because they get A's and B's. So if you get a brand new car on your 16th birthday because you get A's and B's, it's a gift. You didn't earn it. Your parents have the ability to give that to you because you're like doing what they like. And so like they're giving you a gift.
That is going to be tomorrow's episode for the thing, because I really want to go more into that, because that is not true. And it's coming from a personal perspective, because that is not true. They did earn that, because they're like, without that, they would not have gotten it. Therefore, it is earned. It doesn't.
Right, but unless they can show me the pay stub where they clocked into a job and they were paid for getting A's and B's, and then they then use that money to buy whatever they got, then I'm amenable to that. If somehow you were able to finesse a situation where somebody besides your parents, you were able to convince them to sign a contract where they pay you for your grades, like, all right. But, like, your parents giving you money for your grades, everybody's parents push them to get good grades. Some people's parents can't afford to give them money for it. So you didn't earn it. You just have nice parents that can afford to give you money for getting good grades.
Not true. Oh my God. That's gonna be tomorrow's topic, and I'm going to thoroughly prepare on that, because that you're hitting a personal point, and that is not true. Like, it's just simply, it's not true. But we'll.
Hey Ramblers, before you go, make sure you're following us on social media at Assistance HQ across the board for all content and exclusives. And for an even more personal touch, subscribe to our weekly newsletter with the link in the description.